Season 3 of The Desk of a Navy Wife, where you may or may not hear my kiddos in the background. My name is Raina Worthy, and on this podcast, we like to talk about challenges, triumphs, and experiences with being a military spouse. So kick back, relax, make a cup of coffee, or get that evening dinner ready, and watch or listen to me in the background. Hi, everyone. I am joined today by Annie, who is a part of the Military Birth Talk podcast, which I was honored to be able to be a part of that. I'm in episode 68 where I'm interviewed, so be sure to check it out. I will drop it in the show notes. Today on my podcast, she's joining me to cover her story, advocacy efforts, as well as mental health and this military life world. So again, thank you so much, Annie, for joining me. I'm excited to dive into these questions, get to know you a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Raina. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy that we were able to work this out. It's a pain scheduling with me because I live in Japan. So Raina was super flexible and really appreciate that. So I'm super happy to be here. My name is Annie. As I said, I live in Japan currently with my husband who's in the Marine Corps. So we've been stationed here in Japan for about 3.5 years. We have 2 little girls and we have 2 dogs who are important parts of the family. So I always have to mention them. And also they might like flap their ears or something noisy in the background. We just PCS'd up to mainland Japan. I have a podcast. It's called the Military Birth Talk Podcast, where we share military related birth stories. So every birth story that you hear on there is going to be somebody who's either a military spouse or a service member. A couple of military healthcare providers come on and share their perspective, a couple of advocacy conversations. So it's really your very, very niche focus as far as birth story podcast goes. But military birth stories are so unique that I felt like they needed a home for themselves. So that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. Thank you again for sharing. With you talking about how it's very important to highlight the military community, especially our own stories with the military and your Military Birth Talk podcast. Can you share what ultimately inspired that endeavor and having that podcast and why you feel highlighting these military spouses or just the military community, highlighting their stories is important?
Yes. So I was pregnant at the time, early, I think it was in my first trimester. I was taking a walk and I was listening to The Birth Hour, which is a fantastic birth story podcast. It's like the OG podcast. She's put out over 1,000 episodes. And I love listening to that. And I was taking a walk, I was listening to an episode. And at the same time, this is when I was stationed in Okinawa, there was a severe shortage of labor and delivery nurses at the military hospital there. And there's only one place that you can deliver through the military. So if you want to give birth at a hospital, there's one option in Okinawa. And there was this huge shortage of labor and delivery nurses, partially due to the just typical PCS churn, but also partially because the like overseer of the health system for the military had just removed healthcare benefits for civilian contractors. And there are a lot of civilian contractors on Okinawa. And so a lot of them left because they weren't going to get any health insurance. And so as a result, Kadena put out a statement saying that any pregnant person on the island between July and December who was 34 weeks or more would get sent off the island to give birth back to the States.
34 weeks?
34 weeks. And people were PCSing so I knew somebody who was like 28 weeks pregnant when she got to the island. And then the message came out the week that she got there and they were just going to have to turn around and go back. And a lot of people in the military families are pregnant, have babies. It's very common. And people just absolutely freaked out, obviously. And about 2 days later, they reversed the message and they were like, whoops, never mind. We'll figure it out because there was such an outcry. But it made me think about how, as I was taking this walk, listening to these birth stories, there are often these statements that are made that sound general to how people should handle their pregnancies, don't apply to the military. And so I was thinking about that. And then I was thinking about this crazy situation with 34-week pregnant women being shipped across the country to give birth,
And that's a long
across the
flight.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, and not even being sent to their hometowns. They were
Right.
gonna be sent to the chosen, probably San Diego Medical, and then they'd have to, like, do postpartum in a hotel room and then get their baby a passport and then come back.
Yeah.
Just insane. And I was just like, it's so crazy what people giving birth in the military have to do that other people outside would just not believe if you told
Mhm.
them. They'd be like, that can't be right. There has to be some other part of the story you're not telling me. And it's, oh, that's actually the story. And it didn't happen in this case, but there are plenty of people that do have to do that that are they're in some remote location,
Mhm.
their care can't be handled there, and the military sends them across the world, and then they have to fly back 2 weeks
Yeah.
postpartum or whatever. So I feel like it would be so great to have a place to put all those stories where people could feel heard and seen, um, and believed right off the bat. That feeling of affinity and of camaraderie of these are all crazy stories, but we've all weathered the storm. We've all been through it together. So that was the initial idea. And then the amazing part is that I reached out to a woman named Amanda who runs the Military Birth Resource Network and
Mhm.
Postpartum Coalition, or MBRNPC, which is kind of a leading nonprofit to connect military families with birth and postpartum related resources around the globe. And I just wanted to ask her, hey, I had this idea for a podcast. Does something like this already exist? Because I don't want to duplicate efforts. And she was like, I have wanted to do that for years, but I don't have the time. I don't have the like skill set. Would you want to just come on our team and do it as a part of our team?
Yeah.
Yes, that's perfect. They already had the mailing list and the audience, and so I didn't have to do any of that figuring out how to get the word out, which is the hardest part of
Right.
podcasting. So that's how it got started, and so now I'm part of the podcast birth story.
Which I'm so glad that you highlight these stories. They're just different things, challenges that we may face with this. And I'm glad that you have the opportunity to really showcase those voices. You have those real
Right,
life experiences like, hey, this is not rainbows and butterflies and unicorns all the time. And we're going to tell you the real deal. And other
right.
people know if they go through it, someone else similar has gone through some type of story and journey and maybe
Yes.
advocating for it. First, congratulations for meeting up with them and being able to do the podcast. I think that's awesome.
Thanks.
And
Yeah.
nonprofit, which I'm very big on supporting nonprofit.
Yeah.
Love that even more. Through your podcast, what mental health things have you noticed like often throughout the show through these stories?
I think the number one thing that I have noticed as a pattern is actually what the guests themselves say when we finish recording. A lot of them will turn the recording off, especially if it was a hard story. They'll be like, talking about my experience helped me process and helped me heal from that experience, even if it wasn't like really bad. But birth is super intense, and talking about it, it's not something that you just bring up at a dinner party. I mean, unless you're like among like-minded friends, which often
Yeah.
is the case for me, but for the average person, you're not just going to like dive into that. But it's such a transformative experience, and people don't have enough opportunities to talk about it. If you don't schedule time to talk about it, a year goes by and you're like, oh, now I've forgotten the details. So I think being invited to go back to that and process out loud through storytelling is really powerful. And I've had a lot of people say that, that they really appreciate the opportunity to unpack whatever happened. And that's such an important part of maintaining your own mental health,
It is.
talking through experiences.
It is. I can attest to it because I will say when I was on your episode, like I cried. I don't know if you remember, but it's like I cried,
Yeah,
but it was like that sigh of breathing. Like this is my story, and I'm so happy I was able to share it. I feel like it may not heal everybody at once. It may take even more times or more feeling comfortable to share it. But for me, I definitely felt like it's off my chest, and now I can repeat my story if I need to because I'm able to actually
right.
talk about it. I don't have to feel like
Yeah.
bottled up or sound like I'm complaining or anything. It's really just
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, and then I would say the other thing is specific to service members, and that was a lovely surprise. When I started the podcast, I was really thinking about it through the lens of a military spouse
yeah.
because that's my identity and that was my own bias. When I started like pulling together the materials to like bring people on and pitch the show and have guests come on, I was like, "Oh, obviously we're going to have service members too." But I wasn't really thinking as much about their stories, and we got so many applications from the most incredible women who have gone through just unbelievable things to give birth and then to maintain excellence in their military jobs.
Yeah.
And so hearing from them, I think the one through line that most of the active duty women who have come on have said when they do their episodes is that they wanted to come on to help their peers. And I think that that selflessness around, like, helping to protect their colleagues and their peers' mental health gets at that deep community connection that so many service members have and live through their values, and so having the podcast as a way to elevate that kind of mental health, like caring for other people,
Mhm.
has been really wonderful to be a part of.
Yes, and it sounds like it, and with you saying that with the service members, which again, you're like, I didn't even think about, it's opening up a whole nother bubble. Do you highlight, service members that are maybe they're talking on their spouse had the child, right? And so now they're just reflecting on maybe how they were impacted or traumatized or anything. Do you share any of those type of stories as well on the podcast?
We haven't had very many of
Okay.
those, partially just from a gender perspective, like, we
Okay.
have more female listeners, and there
Right.
are far more heterosexual couples in the
Yeah.
military, so, like, just by default, like,
Yeah.
we end up having mostly women service members who have had babies. Unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of same-sex couples reach out to talk about their experience as spouses, and we don't have a lot of men who listen,
And okay.
although I will say, I know that a lot of the women who have come on have, like, encouraged their husbands specifically to listen, and we've had a couple of male spouses of service members who've come on say, "I listened and I learned a lot, and this has helped me, like, be a better leader for my female Marines or female airmen or whatever who might be going through this," and so I really appreciate that feedback.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And, future goals, because who knows? Maybe you can do like couples where they're kind of sharing, hey, this happened.
Yes.
I witnessed it, but watching them go through this impacted me in this way. Because I feel like
Yes.
also they may not be birthing the child, but that doesn't mean they don't go through their own process of
Wait.
all of it.
Yeah, so we've had 2 episodes, so
Yeah.
I don't wanna say we've never done it. We've had 2 episodes with
Okay.
couples, which were so fun. Those were just phenomenal, and you're right, like, it's such a unique perspective and such an important perspective because it's a whole family affair giving birth, and like, everybody's involved and impacted, so hearing perspectives from the spouses is really was has been really neat too.
I will definitely drop them in the description because I think it's nice to highlight those ones as well. And who knows,
Yes.
someone might be encouraged. So that's the
Yes.
goal. Let's say future goal. How do you think sharing these birth experiences publicly has helped reduce maybe the stigma around the emotional mental health challenges tied to pregnancy and birth in the military community?
It's a really interesting question because I've had this anxiety recently that, especially with the current, like, political,
Culture.
right, culture around military women
Mhm.
specifically and, like, what they bring or don't bring to the table around, is it actually, like, doing harm to share these stories where women are being truthful about their vulnerability due to giving birth? Is this gonna become, like, proof
Right.
for people who think that women shouldn't be in the military to be like, "Well, look, like, look at all of these things that they have to go through. Look at all these accommodations that their offices need to make, adding pumping rooms," or whatever the case may be, and that's kind of an anxiety that I have had about just speaking truthfully, like, I want this podcast to be something that improves things for women, and right now, it's like, is this actually, like, doing the opposite? But because I've thought about it so much, I think, like, what I always come back to is that everybody brings their own value to a team, and when you take them out of that, the team loses that value. Yes, women who are giving birth are maybe gonna need some extra accommodations that the men on their team might not need, but what do you lose by removing those people from the team? Like, what are the values and the strengths that women bring specifically to the workplace? And I thought about this, like, compared to, each service has their own like list of core values. And if you line up those core values against like what women are traditionally known to have as strengths, there's a lot of overlap. You can say, "Hey, those skill sets are really important to us as an organization and to the mission and we want to figure out a way to make it work." That's a far better approach to take. And so I hope that putting these stories out makes people feel like they can talk about what their strengths are and also how hard they have to work to maintain excellence, like much harder than a male counterpart that doesn't have kids or a family that can work 4 hours a day. And many of the women who are giving birth while in uniform, so to speak, are maintaining the same level of excellence but having to work 3 times as hard. And that's amazing and that should be celebrated. And that's a superpower. I would rather know that those people are in my corner because that's so incredible. Um, that they are that talented and that resilient. Why would you not want that kind of resilience in your organization? I think it's being able to listen to some of these stories and be like, okay, a lot of people have done this before me. They've come out the other side smiling and finding joy in those experiences that to me seem impossible. I think that's really powerful too.
Yes, and I will remain optimistic in that even though this culture is wild right now, that it will impact, like, the healthcare and receiving better healthcare, right? Us advocating for better healthcare, both for our service members that are pregnant, but also the military spouses as well that are going through this journey, and community members, different nonprofits trying to join and support, "Hey, where can I help?" The child development care centers, what can we include as we're building on our child development center. So that's going to be the
Yeah.
optimism that these voices will help to raise that because they may not
Yeah.
be aware. You don't know what you don't know. And they're like, maybe we should work on that. Maybe we should change that
Right.
ultimately.
Totally.
So us, because we've been in this military life for some time, okay, we know that it adds the unique stressors, whether it's like you spoke on, the deployments that they may go through, the TDYs, the PCS, and even postpartum that some families may go through in this relocation. So, how do you see these factors impacting the mental health for spouses or for those service members that you've been able to interview?
Oh my gosh. I mean, hundreds of ways. This gets back to what one of the first things that made me think of this podcast was when I was listening to other birth stories of non-military folks. One of the things that people would say all the time is you have to make sure you have your community around you. Make sure you've got your friends and your family lined up to come help during postpartum, and make sure that you've got people who are going to make you meals, and make sure that you're taking time to nest and like make a nice space for your baby and all these things that I couldn't nest when I was pregnant. We were PCSing when the baby was going to be 6 weeks old. That was out the window. And not that nesting is that important really, but I was like, I can't do that. I can't like focus on that.
Oh,
And as
no,
far
it's
as
household goods.
exactly, exactly. Like your crib can be a cardboard box. And like as far as lining up friends and family to come help postpartum, again, like we were PCSing at 6 weeks postpartum and it happened to also be during COVID. So I was like, I can't do that either. I'm not gonna have any friends and family when we get there. Because I'm not gonna know anybody. And so like, that is the kind of thing that I hear a lot from people being like, I can't do the things that I thought I would be able to do with a new baby. I can't like have my best friend over for coffee when I'm feeling stressed out. I can't like just call my mom who lives 15 minutes down the road and say like, "Hey, I really need to take a shower. Can you come by quickly?" I can't introduce my child to my loved ones. That's a big one. And I think people feel really sad about that. And then you add on top of that, oh, and also, by the way, my husband is deploying, days after giving birth. And this is another thing like people wouldn't believe. We had in our second episode, we had somebody come on and her husband deployed 10 days after she gave birth to her second child. So she had a toddler and a newborn by herself 10 days postpartum. And she did great. She did amazing, but it's I think for the first time you're facing down that tunnel, you're like, "Oh god, like this is a huge challenge." And so that I've heard from a lot of spouses who have postpartum depression as a result of feeling really alone in their postpartum days because of the military lifestyle, being away from your friends and family and potentially having a spouse who's not around, whether that's because they're deployed or TDY or just because like the culture in their unit is such that taking a lot of paternity leave or parental leave is not it's kind of frowned upon,
Ah,
especially before the more recent change, which allowed for 12 weeks. But before that, it was like,
a
I
couple
mean,
weeks.
and even
Yeah, that's when I
right,
heard that they changed it. I was like, "What? 12
right, yeah.
weeks? What's that?"
I know. I've heard from people who are like, "We were done," but then when we heard about 12 weeks, we're like, "Maybe we should have another one just to have that
Just to take advantage of the 12
just
weeks.
yeah, just to experience what it's like." And I say that jokingly, but, like, truly just to experience what it would be like to have the experience that you thought you were gonna have with your partner at home and somebody to help,
Yeah,
somebody to be there so you can take a nap in the middle of the day because you were up all night. Like, those things are tremendously challenging. And again, this is really more specific to spouses, but that's what I hear a lot on the mental health front is just the challenge of doing it kind of on your own. And I put a little asterisk next to that because one of the more powerful things that I've heard is the ways that people mitigate that feeling of aloneness and
mhm,
loneliness. And I think the military community is ripe with opportunities to balance that, but from a mental health perspective, that is so hard. And then I think for service members, the biggest thing that I've heard is, yeah, just feeling like you have to hide your yeah, everything, like to hide the experience that you're going through. Women who will say that, they drop their babies off at the CDC on their first day back at work and just like cry in their car, or a female pilot who got stuck on a quick mission because the plane broke and she didn't have her pump with her. And so she's like stressing about getting mastitis. And then she gets off the plane and like takes off her flight suit and she's just like covered in milk. And that she's incredible. And she told that story while laughing. But that's incredibly challenging. And again, it's an example of like she nailed the mission. She didn't miss a beat and she had to do it while doing all of this other like mental gymnastics around her pumping schedule. And so I just think it's amazing what I keep coming back to that, what women in the military community have to go through to have babies and feed them and
yeah.
also be excellent at the same time, whether that's in their family life or at work.
Yes, I know when met service members that have had children, I didn't realize, and I don't know why, I didn't realize that they're like, they have to get down back to a certain weight by a certain time and do all of this and do all this fitness and make sure that they don't have to get taped or whatever before they can really delve back into some of their roles. And it's like mind boggling to me. And I think it's more of, what happens if you like just had a C-section? Do they give you the extra time that you may need to recover? Or and I know I've heard some service members who have had to get discharged, like they had to
Yeah.
medically discharge because they didn't get to this by this time frame. And to me, that's hurtful. That's like really because
Totally, because 'cause you're losing valuable people. Like, it reminds me of one of the stories that we recorded, of a woman who's in the Marine Corps who gave birth, and then she went to her 6-week postpartum checkup, and the provider was like, "You're cleared to go back to work to do your, regular activities." But because the checkup wasn't really thorough enough, they didn't really get down to the detail that her job was very physical. So she ended up doing like a 6-mile hike at like 8 weeks postpartum, and she ended up with like complete organ prolapse, which is
um,
where like your internal organs like basically fall out of your vagina because your pelvic floor is still weak.
recovering.
Right. Which is obviously, like, hugely traumatic and prevented her from being able to stay in the service. So somebody could hear that story and be like, "Okay, well, that's why women shouldn't be in the military because, like, men wouldn't have that issue. So therefore, like, that's proof that women don't belong." Or you could say, like, "Why don't we train our providers to ask the right questions?"
That's the
Um
better response. Yeah.
Right, because, like, it's not like somebody else couldn't have done that hike and taken photos, right?
Right.
Everybody's replaceable in their jobs, like, in small ways, and had she been more protected, like, it would have been a relatively minor cost to the unit to protect her health in that moment, and then they wouldn't have lost her talent, and that's such a bigger loss than finding somebody to like somebody in a really physical task
Yeah.
one time.
So different things, just knowing. And I feel like if we could get these community members or the military leaders, just sit down and just listen to all these. Just sit down,
Yeah.
listen to all these, take notes on what can be changed, would be really beautiful, a good hope. And I will say, I do believe that us having these conversations, these honest conversations, have helped us get to that 12-week that we were just talking and joking about. Oh, it'd be nice for
Right.
the spouse to stay with us for 12 weeks. But it's like, look at everything that everyone had to go through to be able to just get to that point. So I'm
Right.
hoping that these stories will continue to grow and build on our health system and our providers as well.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yes. So now I'm going to take a shift a little bit more towards you and your journey. I know you share
Yeah.
your two littles and your two dogs as well that are part of the family. But what was your own journey with birth and motherhood, and how it has taught you about mental health and resilience?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So we, as I said, we had our first child during COVID. And my first pregnancy was really great. It was very positive, very kind of straightforward. But I went into that pregnancy pretty fearful about giving birth, just like as a concept. I didn't really have any experience up to that point with like hearing really positive birth experiences. So I just kind of felt like the norm was like birth is unpleasant, but you have to like deal with it to get to the other side. And I ended up reading some birth stories during that pregnancy that really shifted my mindset around that. And so, like, kind of moved me from being fearful to the experience to actually being really excited for the experience. And that was one of the first ways that I think I noticed that I could have some measure of control over my mental health, that like staying in fear was not helpful for me and that I could actually like choose to think about things differently. And that's sort of a big tenet of hypnobirthing, which I took a hypnobirthing class during that pregnancy.
Wow.
Um
We have to
and I
talk about that one. We need to talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, it was really cool. I ended up, having a C-section because our first child was breech,
Mhm.
and so I didn't really use it in the same way that I had planned to, but a lot of the same principles and lessons were very helpful in terms of getting myself into a mind space that was helpful and supportive instead of keeping my body in fear and tension, and I've used those principles throughout the last 4 years in situations that have nothing to do with birth, in just painful or stressful situations. So it was kinda cool how, like, being pregnant started that journey for
Yeah.
me, but her birth was fine, it was a C-section, and then afterwards, we PCS'd like 6 weeks after giving birth, and my husband's he was in school that year, and the base that we moved to, the way that they did it was you arrived to the base and got on the housing wait list, and they put you in a hotel for, like, a few weeks
Mhm.
before now I hear about that all the time, but
Yeah.
then I had never the concept of doing that was like I was like, "What?
Why?
That we're gonna live in a hotel like, but we
Where's
have a
the baby
baby, and, like, we have 2 dogs, like, what do you mean we're gonna live in a hotel for 2 weeks?"
one
I could not believe it,
Yeah,
and now it's like that's very common,
so
unfortunately, but
common.
that was so rough for me because I was still, in sort of a hard mental place postpartum. I definitely had the baby blues, I was really overwhelmed, and then we were living in this tiny space, that was kind of depressing, and it was super hot. It was the middle of the summer, so we couldn't
Mhm.
really in Kansas, so it was like 100 degrees out, so we couldn't really go outside that much, and it was just kind of a depressing way to start motherhood for me,
Yeah.
that 2 weeks, which just felt sort of being in a weird purgatory. And then things got a little bit better, but then around 4 months postpartum, I was like, "I don't really feel right. I just don't really feel like myself. I'm not really enjoying motherhood. Everything just feels a little bit dark." And so I reached out to my provider. I was really worried that taking an antidepressant would make me feel like numb, and instead it like woke me back up. Like I felt like it reconnected me to myself. I felt more myself. I was like better able to enjoy motherhood, less stressed and anxious about the little things, and it just totally it was a total lifesaver. That was my mental health kind of journey with that first one. And then about a year went by. We decided we wanted to get pregnant again. We did. By this time, we were in Okinawa. So we had actually just PCS to Okinawa. And a month or so after we arrived, found out that we were pregnant. And 10 or 11 weeks, we got the genetic screening done, and we really only got it done to find out the sex of the baby, like, that was our main reason for getting it, but
Yeah.
that was why we really wanted to get it, so I wasn't even really thinking about the genetic. I just took it for granted that
Right.
everything would be fine, and we found out in that screening that the baby had screened positive for trisomy 18, which is a fatal, it's traditionally not compatible with life condition.
Mhm.
Most of the babies who have it either die during pregnancy or during childbirth or within like a week of life. The only healthcare option was the military. And I'll just give a warning here for any listeners who might not want to hear about pregnancy termination or abortion. I will be talking about that. So feel free to skip through that if that's not something you want to hear about. But we did decide that we wanted to terminate the pregnancy knowing that our child would die. And so we talked to our doctor about this, and he was like, I can't help you. This is a military facility. We can't do that. We can't do elective abortions here. And he was phenomenal, super compassionate. He was like, I wish I could help you, but I can't. So we ended up having to fly back to California. And that was just from a mental health perspective, ending a wanted pregnancy is so hard. And then also on top of that, not having the ability to get that care, it made it so much worse because it took longer. And this is the thing that frustrates me. Like, I have respect for anybody who has any type of opinion about abortion because it's
Mhm.
such a personal thing. There's no objective right or wrong answer. I think it's just a personal,
Personal.
like,
Yeah.
based on your personal beliefs. So, but what does frustrate me about the conversation often is when people talk about like later abortions, like people don't want to get abortions later. Nobody wants to do that. Like,
Go through.
it yeah, nobody wants to go through a longer time being pregnant if that ultimately that's not how it's gonna end up, and that's how it was for us, extra weeks, and so, like, sitting 4 a.m. having to call clinics back in the States with, like, a 17-week pregnant belly was
Yeah.
horrible, and again, with the mental health component, we weren't around our friends and family, and we didn't really know who we could talk to because you don't
Right.
really know how people are gonna feel about that. Uh, but I will say that flying back and being at a clinic that was really trained in compassionate care around these things was very healing. And I ended up actually being grateful that we did that because we were with a staff who was really familiar with this type of situation and was very well trained in clearly in how to talk to families going through this and how to care for them really well, and that felt really healing after having gone through what we had just gone through. And so we came back to Okinawa, and then we're very fortunate a few months later I got pregnant again, and that is now our almost 2-year-old. That pregnancy was super joyful, and I sort of made the decision to
Mhm.
not let my mental health spiral during that. I think at the beginning, I was kind of when people would talk about the due date or the baby coming home in my head, I would be thinking if she's born, not when.
Yeah.
And it took kind of a long time to like fully pull myself out of that. But my husband and I both were really just want to be in joy in this pregnancy and just be happy and not spend the entire time worried. And that's really hard after pregnancy loss because you know what can happen and you're fully awake to all of the possibilities of things that can go wrong. But I think practicing being in the moment was such an important thing for my mental
Mhm.
health throughout pregnancy and having young kids that I really had to just apply that to this pregnancy. And every day I would wake up and be like, she's here. She's still here. She's still healthy. I can feel her kicking. So I'm going to be present in joy today and not in fear. And for the most part, it was a great pregnancy, and it was a really amazing experience. And after that,
Yeah.
my husband did have to go on a 2-week TDY when she was 2 weeks old. So I had the toddler and the baby, just like all these other stories before me.
Yes.
And that was super hard. Thankfully, I had stayed on that prescription, so I actually asked my provider to increase it a little bit, knowing that I was heading into this sort of darker period, and that helped a bit, but it was very, very hard. I'm super emotional postpartum. I think some people are just really blissful and euphoric. That really hasn't been my experience. It feels very, like, dark and heavy for me much of the time, and to feel that way and also not have my partner with me was really, really hard emotionally. So, again, that mental health thing, like, it goes up and down, and I really needed to lean on the military community. Like, there are things that being a part of that community presents, the opportunities that I think are huge blessings that aren't as easy to find outside of the military community. We lived in a neighborhood, like a cul-de-sac with like 20 other units, and they made a meal train for us. So we didn't have to cook at all for like a month, which was amazing. I had a scare 4 days postpartum with my blood pressure and ended up having to go spend a night at the ER. And so, like, our neighbors brought over formula so that the baby wouldn't be hungry, and because I was breastfeeding and we didn't have any in the house. If we had been out in the civilian world, it might have been harder to come by those resources so quickly. Whereas when you live on base and you have neighbors right there, you just text your like neighborhood group chat, can somebody drop a can of formula at my house? And it was there within 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think that you really have to like do the work to create those communities and to create those support systems. And you have to commit to it every time you move, which kind of sucks. You don't always want to. You're like, oh, I don't want to start over again. I know, but you just have to do it because it's so important, and you never know when you'll need it, but also you never know who else might need it, who might need whatever you have to offer. And those relationships end up being so wonderful.
Ooh,
Yeah.
this is like lifetime for sure for a lot of
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much for sharing your story and being comfortable enough and transparent enough to share just the different mental health phases you went through, the different challenges that you went through, and especially with that tough topic that, like you said, people are maybe torn on, right? It's your personal
Mhm.
choice. And I'm sorry that you had to go through it. I am happy that you chose joy, like at the end, as far as how you were going to attack certain things and you advocated for yourself ultimately, is what it sounds like. You didn't stay in silence. You're like, hey, I need this. I need this. This is what we're going to do. This is the support I need. And so you just showcasing that is strength and resilience in its own. And so I just want to take the time to tell you that you are very
Thanks.
strong and resilient and you went through something that is very difficult that not everyone has gone through or will go through. And you're seeing in different situations different joys and I'm not gonna say the almost the light, right, in your second child
Yeah.
in that experience, and like you said, not taking things for granted either, the different things that it taught. And your
Yeah.
story, just that snippet, I hope touches other military spouses that may have had to go through those similar situations, or they're kind of maybe going through it now and afraid of like, what can I do? What are my options? And so
Yeah.
you sharing, hey, these are your options. There are options out there and just
Yeah.
finding the right people. So
Yeah. Thanks.
yes. With you not staying in silence, right? Some spouses may be reluctant and they may stay silent with everything that they're going through, whether it's postpartum or just, hey, I know my mental health is not where I want it to be. What are some signs someone might be struggling that their partner, friend, or family member should look out for?
Well, I will say, first of all, I'm not an expert. I'm not a healthcare provider.
Okay.
So this is my personal experience. But I will say, I think one of the common things is not being able to find joy in the things that normally make you happy. So if you typically really enjoy watching a movie at the end of the day or sitting and having a cup of coffee at the beginning of the day on the couch with your dogs or whatever it is, taking a walk. If those things are not the thought of doing those things feels like a chore or something you're not interested in, I think that's a really big one. I will also say anger is a huge one that doesn't get talked about enough, but rage is a huge red flag for postpartum depression and probably perinatal, prenatal depression too, which also does not get a lot of attention. I would say those are two that I have heard more and more about recently and that I've heard from are just speaking from experience of the stories that I've heard on my podcast. The lack of joy in things that normally make you happy and intense irritability and or rage, especially postpartum. I think that those are 2. If you're somebody who's a spouse or a friend of somebody who's just had a baby, don't be afraid to ask them about it. Don't be afraid to say, "I've noticed that you seem not yourself." Because even if it's not an issue of severe mental health, it's just that person is feeling overwhelmed. I think having people ask is really helpful because when you're in it, you don't have the bandwidth to like find a time to talk about it or find the words to talk about it or even know how to bring it up. And being asked provides that opening that can make it easier to talk about. But I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I don't want to be nosy or I don't want to make them feel bad or I should just let them work it out on their own or whatever. But I think asking and showing that you care and showing that you notice is a really big deal for people.
Thank you for sharing that tip. I will take that into my own life and talking to some friends because like you said, you may feel like I don't want to pry, but you do notice, you recognize, especially if you're around people a lot or a certain person a lot, and it's like, oh, you're different. Like something's different, something's changed. So sharing, having,
Yeah.
being comfortable to have those uncomfortable conversations, you're the one that has to reach out. So thank you for that tip. To add to that tip, are there any other resources or strategies that you'd recommend for military spouses to take care of their mental health during the pregnancy or that postpartum season?
I would just say don't be afraid to talk to your PCM about it if you're
Mm,
feeling anything, if you're feeling off, because there are a lot more resources out there for military members and spouses than I think we realize. So I would say just because you don't see something out there doesn't mean it's not there. It's
mm,
probably just buried. And so talk to your provider, talk to your friends, post on the Facebook groups at your base or your installation. Use the search feature in your Facebook groups to find what you might need. Even just putting in the phrase mental health into your local installations Facebook page or military spouse groups can be really helpful because there are a lot of resources. If you ask people, they will guide you in the right direction. I would say, like, the tip is like, don't rely on what you see as what's available. So it sounds very cliche, but don't be afraid to ask for help. Ask your provider, ask your community. Um, and I think you'll find more than you realize. But
right.
some specific things that I'll say, the Military Life Family Counselor, MFLACs,
Oh,
um,
what is it? Military.
Military Life and Family Counselors.
Some installations will call them a consultant or military.
Right.
Yes, but it starts with the M.
Yeah.
Yeah.
MFLCs, they're around. They're everywhere. So chances I think it's required. So you will probably have one or more of those. And they are phenomenal. So you can reach out to them for counseling, or just somebody to talk to. Chaplains are great. I've never utilized one, but people will recognize or will recommend that a lot. So reach out to your local installation chaplain. It doesn't have to be a religious conversation. You don't have to have a religious affiliation to talk to those folks. They're just trained in being there to help you through whatever season of life you're going through. It can be hard for some of us who are a little bit more introverted to not want to like make a new friend everywhere we move, but like especially if you're newer to the military, you might not realize how shallow your relationship with somebody has to be to become deeper, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
if you run into somebody at a coffee shop, like strike up a conversation and then ask for their number. Like that's totally common in this world where like it's not out in the real world. Like, and I've made so many good friends just by being, hey, we struck up a conversation at the crosswalk and now you're my emergency contact. Don't be afraid to do that kind of thing because people expect it. And it's kind of the only way you can really build up your deep relationships here.
Yes, and what I'd like to add to just the different resources, if you go to your maybe your state or your city page, that there's gonna be a website that exists and just type in same, like you said, in the search engine, use those search engine, mental health or therapist or counseling, and maybe you're not comfortable on the installation and you may wanna get a referral, look into that because those are other
Yeah.
options that exist as well. So,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't give a plug to MBRNPC, the nonprofit that runs the podcast, and that specifically is designed to be like a central directory for birth and postpartum resources around the globe. And there are chapters that you can join if you go to the Facebook page, so that you can see what's available in your specific area. And if you don't see anything, you can always reach out to our Facebook or Instagram and message the admins and say, hey, I'm postpartum, I'm struggling, I need to find a TRICARE provider that will see me. Do you have a recommendation? Definitely check out MBRNPC.
And now my question is more towards, and it's a tough question because it's about our community leaders, our healthcare providers, and even other spouses. Because I know you said coffee chats, but more to that. How can those people in that military community do better in supporting mothers through birth and postpartum mental health challenges?
I mean, I just come back to the biggest thing is like celebrating what women bring to the table. I think so often the conversation is framed around how women having babies make it harder for organizations and like the challenges that it creates, especially for service members. But reframing the conversation around what they bring to the table and why it's important that we provide the supports that they need to be successful, that's just so much more of a powerful framing of things.
I
It's a
think,
hard question.
yeah, it is.
I mean, some more standardization would probably be better so that people know what to expect. The biggest thing is that especially those in leadership, I wish that they would focus more on framing these conversations around the what assets women are and unique assets women have and bring to the table and try to protect those in military workspaces so that these units and organizations have those skill sets in their midst, cuz it's a big loss, I think, if women feel like they can't bring their full selves to their jobs and they bring unique benefit. So I would like to see more leadership conversations framed about that, not around what do we have to do to accommodate people
Right.
having babies, but what do we get to do to support these people so that they stay in their jobs and continue to bring the excellent talent and service that they have been bringing to us without leaving.
Yes, I love that. I feel like a lot of companies, just think of like companies where it's how can we retain our people? It's
Yeah,
exactly the
right.
same. Like you want to
Yeah,
retain your service members, you're making these accommodations and not feeling like it's a chore to do so. It's just
right. And it's not like
it's a
military
benefit.
recruitment is at an all-time high right now. 50% of the population wants to be a part of this team. Like you should make that work.
Yeah, make it work, figure it out.
Right, right.
My final question for you, Annie, looking ahead, what do you hope Military Birth Talk podcast will accomplish in shifting the conversation about birth and mental health in military families?
I just want it to shift the conversation from being like a deficit focused conversation to an asset focused conversation. And I want those women to feel more seen for what they have to go through to bring babies into the world. So I want those people to be championed for what they've had to go through and for their peers and leadership and family members to realize that yeah, they've had to work twice or three times as hard to get to the same place, and that is an incredible accomplishment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to get to talk about this, and I love being able to talk about the birth story of the podcast. It's really it's really fun. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and focusing on mental health within this community is super important. So I really appreciate your work and for allowing me to be a small part of it.
Absolutely. I'm glad to have you. I will have to definitely have more episodes on different topics as well. And I really do appreciate what you've gone through, what you've shared, and what your goals are with your podcast. So thank you again.
Thank you, Raina.
Thank you again for tuning in this week. I look forward to bringing you resources, support, and laughter. Sending my love from the desk of a Navy wife.